Calm down. I'm not a racist. I'm just going to explain what is currently happening in Hollywood. Have you noticed that almost every major recent production seems to be changing the ethnicity of classic characters we grew up watching? First, we need to understand the business logic. Hollywood today doesn't make films for just one country. The market is global. Studios have diversity quotas that, for many executives, serve to try and connect these old stories with a younger audience, or to try and win an Oscar. To them, the visual change is a quick and often superficial way to say that the brand is updated. But does this strategy really work, or is it causing the opposite effect? To understand why the audience rejects some changes and accepts others, we need to talk about the concept of organicity. It's not about the character's ethnicity, it's about how the change fits into the internal logic of the narrative. Think of Nick Fury in the MCU. Before Samuel L. Jackson, Fury was a Caucasian agent in the comics. However, when he appeared on screen, the change wasn't felt as a culture shock. Why? Because the script didn't try to make Fury's skin color the core of his dramatic arc. He was introduced as a pragmatic leader, a figure of unquestionable authority whose presence commanded respect. The change was perceived as a stylistic update, respecting the soul of the character, the relentless strategist. The audience accepted it because the quality of the character surpassed the aesthetic.
Now, compare that to The Little Mermaid. Here, the change didn't feel like an artistic choice to expand the universe, but a checklist move. When the discussion about the film stops being about the quality of the script, the soundtrack, or the acting, and becomes about imposed visual representation, the work loses its essence. The audience feels that the character is being used as a political billboard, not as a living being within that fantasy. And the situation becomes even more complex when studios try to rewrite the past to justify these changes. Look at Severus Snape in Harry Potter. In the original work, Snape's drama is deeply rooted in his melancholy nature and, yes, his appearance. He's described as a pale man, an outcast, almost a ghost, which reinforces his loneliness and social isolation. Recently, there has been an attempt to reinterpret the bullying Snape endured, that extreme isolation caused by his physical appearance and antisocial behavior, as a direct allegory for systemic racism. When you take a drama that was about human alienation and try to force it into a box of identity politics, you aren't just changing the character, you are destroying the emotional arc that the original author built. It sounds forced, precisely because it doesn't dialogue with the original context, but rather with the agenda of the moment. The difference is brutal. In Nick Fury's case, the change served the character. In the case of Snape or other forced reinterpretations, the character is serving the change. When the message becomes more important than the coherence of the world the character inhabits, the spectator, who knows the work, who has an affection for it, feels alienated. They realize the studio isn't trying to tell a new story, but rather give a moral lecture that no one asked for, using the skin of characters we grew up loving as a shield to avoid any real criticism regarding the creative decay of the product. What many don't see is that this change is just one piece of a much larger game. In a world where the social media algorithm rewards conflict, controversy generates engagement. When a studio alters a character, they know the internet is going to catch fire. Debate generates clicks, clicks generate views, and in the end, the subject stays in the trending topics. For the studio, talk good or talk bad, but talk about my movie.
When you understand this, you realize that the decision is not purely artistic, but financial and algorithmic. The impact of this is that we stop discussing the quality of the story, the script, or the acting, and start discussing only the visual controversy. This ends up emptying the meaning of the works we love so much, transforming art into a stage for a cultural war. And what do they gain from this? Simple. Have you ever heard the concept of divide and conquer? It's ancient, used since the Roman Empire. In entertainment, this strategy gained strength over the last decade with the rise of recommendation algorithms. Executives realized that conflict generates more traffic than consensus. By introducing controversial changes, they force polarization. One group defends inclusion, and the other defends fidelity, and both spend the day arguing on social media. The company gains free exposure and engagement skyrockets. But why is using this strategy so efficient for the market, even if it costs the loyalty of older fans? The answer will surprise you because it turns each one of us into a piece of a board we didn't even know existed. The tactic works by creating mutual distrust. Whoever gets upset with the change is labeled a racist by the algorithm and the media, while whoever defends the change is seen by the opposing group as someone who doesn't care about the original work. This isolates groups into bubbles. In literature and cinema, works like George Orwell's 1984 or the concept of social engineering already warned us. When you keep the population busy fighting over cultural symbols, you divert attention from structural issues, such as script quality, inflated budgets, or questionable production choices. When you understand this, you realize that your feeling of outrage or your feeling of defense is being used to monetize attention. It's not about representation, and it's not about cleaning up the cast. It's to keep the audience engaged with your channel, your Twitter, your platform. While we fight over a character's skin color, the studios secure the trending topic and keep the focus away from potential creative failures. But we need to go beyond the obvious. When we cite George Orwell's 1984, we aren't just talking about government surveillance, but about control of reality through language and the destruction of the past. In 1984, the Ministry of Truth rewrote newspapers and memories so that the narrative of the present always seemed like the only one possible. Today, Hollywood acts as an arm of this social engineering. By deconstructing the icons of our childhood, characters that carry not just entertainment, but the emotional memory of generations, they aren't just changing a skin color or a physical trait, they're promoting memory erasure. When you replace the visual essence of a classic hero or protagonist, you break the psychological connection the audience has with the original work. It's a way of saying, your memory of this doesn't matter anymore. What matters is the updated version we've decided to impose now. It creates cultural uprooting. The spectator stops feeling like a part of that story, feeling instead like a stranger in a world they helped build through their consumption and affection over the decades. Here enters the theory of replacement, and the reason it is as lucrative as it is dangerous. Look, the industry has two paths: create new icons or maintain old assets. When we see the success of characters like Miles Morales or Black Panther, we realize that the market is perfectly capable of creating new deep characters that add real cultural value. The audience embraced Miles because he didn't erase Peter Parker. He expanded the Spider-Man universe. Black Panther didn't take anyone's place. He built his own legacy. But why then do studios insist on overlapping ethnicities on established characters? The answer is purely financial. The risk is practically zero. Creating a new character requires an immense investment in marketing, building a fan base, and time for the audience to get attached to this novelty. The chance of a new character flopping is real. By taking a classic, famous, and consolidated IP, the studio has half the work done. They take brand recognition, an existing fan base, and a nostalgia, and apply a controversial change to force engagement through the fight. They're investing in art. They're investing in insurance. It's much cheaper from a corporate perspective to cause a worldwide scandal with a character everyone already knows than to risk millions of dollars on an original franchise that no one knows will sell. The overlap is therefore the lazy strategy of those who prefer to monetize the conflict generated by a classic icon, rather than have the creative courage to build a new icon from scratch. At the end of the day, genuine representation requires effort. Facade representation only requires a social media filter and an optimized risk spreadsheet. And if the goal is financial security through conflict, what remains for the writer who really wants to tell an original story? The divide and conquer strategy is not new, but it has never been as lucrative as it is in the age of algorithms. Conflict among fans is the fuel that keeps these series and movies on top, creating a cycle where distrust replaces constructive criticism. The result? Entertainment loses its magic, and we lose the ability to dialogue. And this division isn't limited to series and movie screens.